The moment my mother-in-law placed the steaming cup in front of me, something felt off. The smell, it wasn't just coffee. It had a bitter, almost chemical scent that made my stomach twist. My husband sat beside me, scrolling through his phone, completely unaware. Without thinking, I reached for his cup and swapped it with mine. He took a sip, and my heart pounded. This is a story of suspicion, betrayal, and the unsettling truth that sometimes, the people closest to us have the darkest intentions. Before we get into the story, let us know where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe. When I married Daniel, I thought we'd be starting our lives together on our own terms. Instead, just a few weeks after the wedding, we ended up moving into his childhood home, his mother's house. It was supposed to be temporary, just while we searched for a house of our own, but even as I unpacked my bags in the guest room, something in me whispered that this wasn't going to be as simple as Daniel made it sound. His mother, Eleanor, was the kind of woman who could make you feel both welcome and unwelcome at the same time. Her smile was polished, her voice warm, but there was something in her eyes that never quite matched. The first thing she said when we arrived wasn't welcome home, or even how was the drive. No, the first thing she said, after taking one long look at me, was, "Oh, that dress is simple." I should have known then. Daniel, of course, didn't notice. He kissed his mother's cheek, set our bags down, and started chatting like nothing was wrong. I stood there, clutching my purse, trying to convince myself that I was imagining things. Eleanor was just one of those old money women who didn't know how to be warm. That's what I told myself. But as the days went on, I started seeing things for what they really were. At first, it was small, tiny things that could have been passed off as nothing. She'd rearrange my things when I wasn't looking, always placing them just slightly out of reach. She'd accidentally forget to set a place for me at dinner. If I cooked something for Daniel, she'd make sure to have something better prepared. "Daniel always loved my roast chicken," she'd say, taking the plate I made right out of his hands. "You don't mind, do you, dear?" Every night, when Daniel and I lay in bed, I debated telling him. But every time I opened my mouth, I pictured him laughing it off, just like he did when I mentioned her weird comment about my dress. One evening, as I walked past her room, I heard her speaking in hushed tones on the phone. "She's not right for him," she was saying. "I won't let him throw his life away on the wrong woman." I froze. There it was. Proof. I wanted to march in there, to demand she say it to my face, but instead I backed away. I wasn't afraid of her, I just knew how this would go. If I told Daniel, he'd say I was overreacting, that his mom was just being dramatic. So I stayed quiet. But I also started paying closer attention. And that's when I realized something I hadn't before. Eleanor wasn't just making me feel unwelcome. She was testing me. At first, I tried to convince myself that maybe I was just overthinking things. Maybe Eleanor was just set in her ways, one of those women who didn't know how to express affection but meant well in her own rigid, sharp-edged way. But then the little things started piling up. I'd leave a sweater draped over the chair in our room, only to find it missing the next morning. Days later, I'd find it crumpled in the laundry room, stuffed behind the washing machine like someone had tossed it there on purpose. My necklace, my grandmother's necklace, the one I never took off, vanished from my nightstand one night. I tore through our room looking for it, but it was just gone. I told Daniel, and he shrugged, saying I probably misplaced it. "Maybe you left it in the bathroom," he said. I didn't. I knew I didn't. But the thing that really got to me? The food. Every time I cooked something for Daniel, it never actually made it to his plate. I'd spend time preparing a meal, only to step away for a moment and come back to find it switched. "Oh, I didn't think you'd mind," Eleanor would say, her tone as sweet as syrup. Daniel always loved my cooking. Daniel, clueless as ever, would just eat whatever was put in front of him, completely unaware that the meal I had made had been tossed out. I started to feel like I was losing my grip on reality. It was so subtle, so perfectly designed to make me doubt myself. And then one morning, I walked into the bathroom and saw something that made my stomach drop. A box of pregnancy tests. I stared at it, my mind racing. I hadn't bought them. I wasn't even late. But there they were, sitting right on the counter like they were meant to be found. Before I could even process it, Eleanor appeared in the doorway, her expression perfectly neutral. "Oh," she said, her eyes flicking to the box. "Are you expecting?" There was something in her voice, something calculated. I gritted my teeth. No, I said. She hummed, like she didn't quite believe me. Well, accidents happen, she said lightly. Daniel always wanted a big family. I knew what she was doing. She was planting doubt. Making Daniel think I was hiding something. And I wasn't going to play along. That night, I decided enough was enough. When Daniel went to take a shower, I snuck his phone off the nightstand. I wasn't proud of it, but I needed to know if she had been saying things to him behind my back. And sure enough, there it was. A message from Eleanor. Come alone. She doesn't need to know. I stared at it, my heart pounding. She was up to something. And whatever it was, I needed to find out before it was too late. I put Daniel's phone back exactly as I found it, my hands trembling. Come alone. She doesn't need to know. What did that mean? What was Eleanor planning? I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined Eleanor whispering in Daniel's ear, twisting things, making me seem like the bad guy. By morning, I had made a decision. If I wanted to prove what she was doing, I had to start keeping track of everything. I grabbed an old notebook and started writing everything down. Every time something went missing. Every time my food got switched. Every little comment she made. Every time she tried to drive a wedge between me and Daniel. At first, it felt silly, like I was making too big a deal out of nothing. But the more I wrote, the more I realized how much she had been doing. It wasn't just in my head. It was real. But Daniel? He remained completely oblivious. I started testing him, dropping hints to see if he knew more than he let on. I think my necklace got stolen, I told him one night, watching his reaction carefully. He barely looked up from his laptop. Stolen? Don't you just lose things all the time? My stomach tightened. That was exactly what Eleanor wanted him to think. I don't just lose things, I said, trying to keep my voice even. And it's not just that. Other weird stuff keeps happening. I cooked dinner for us last night, and somehow it got switched before you ate it. He chuckled. Babe, you're acting like my mom's part of some big conspiracy. I forced a smile, even though I wanted to scream. I guess I'm just being paranoid, I mumbled. But deep down, I knew I wasn't. And then the sickness started. The first time, I woke up in the middle of the night with my stomach twisting in knots. I barely made it to the bathroom before I started throwing up. Daniel rubbed my back, half asleep. Maybe it's something you ate, he mumbled. Maybe. But the second time? It happened right after a meal Eleanor made. I sat at the dinner table, poking at my food, my stomach uneasy. I wasn't even sure why. The food looked fine. Eleanor watched me with that same polite smile, her hands folded neatly in her lap. I forced myself to eat a few bites. Within an hour, the nausea hit. The next morning, Eleanor knocked on our bedroom door, a steaming cup of coffee in her hands. I thought I'd make you something to help settle your stomach, she said, offering me the cup. Her voice was warm, but something about it felt off. I took the cup with a hesitant smile. Thanks. I didn't drink it. I waited until she left, then poured it down the sink. And that's when I saw it, the residue. A strange powdery film clinging to the inside of the mug. My hands started shaking. She was doing something to me. And I needed to prove it. I stood over the sink, staring at the residue clinging to the mug. It wasn't normal. My hands tightened around the ceramic, my pulse hammering in my ears. Eleanor had given me this coffee. She had smiled at me, warm, polite, like she always did. But there was something in it. I was sure of it now. I had to be smart. If I accused her outright, she'd just twist things, make me look paranoid, maybe even make Daniel think I was losing my mind. No. I needed proof. The next morning, I sat at the dining table, forcing myself to act normal. Daniel scrolled through his phone, barely paying attention. Eleanor moved around the kitchen with the same effortless grace she always had, humming softly to herself. Then, she placed 2 steaming cups of coffee on the table. One in front of me. One in front of Daniel. I glanced up at her. She smiled. Thought I'd make you both something special this morning. I picked up my cup. The moment it got close to my face, my stomach lurched. There it was again. That scent. It wasn't just coffee. My grip tightened on the mug, but I kept my expression neutral. Beside me, Daniel lifted his cup, still distracted by his phone. I acted without thinking. In one smooth motion, I reached over and swapped our mugs. Daniel barely noticed. He took a sip, and my heart started pounding. For a moment, nothing happened. He set the cup down, rubbing his forehead. I held my breath, watching. Then, Daniel winced, pressing his fingers to his temple. Ugh, my head feels weird. Eleanor's spoon clinked against her teacup. The sound was too sharp, too precise. Daniel, sweetheart, she said, her voice smooth as ever, are you feeling all right? His face twisted slightly, like he was trying to shake off dizziness. Yeah. I don't know. Just a headache, I think. I glanced at Eleanor. She was watching him. Not with concern, but with something else. Her fingers had curled slightly against the tablecloth, just barely. A flicker of something crossed her face. Panic. It was small, so small that if I hadn't been looking for it, I would have missed it. But I saw it. She knew. She knew something was in that coffee. And now, I had proof. I forced myself to stay calm. I couldn't let her see that I knew. Instead, I reached for the cup Daniel had almost finished and brought it to my lips, pretending to take a sip. It's good, I murmured. Thanks, Eleanor. She smiled, but her eyes were sharp, searching my face. I'm glad you liked it, dear. The game had changed. I wasn't just on the defensive anymore. I was playing too. And Eleanor? She had just lost. I carried on as if nothing had happened. Daniel rubbed his forehead again, muttering about how he was probably just dehydrated. Eleanor made a passing comment about stress and busy schedules, her voice smooth, unreadable. But I knew better. That wasn't stress. It wasn't dehydration. Something had been in that coffee. I had proof now, but I needed to be smart. If I confronted Eleanor without solid evidence, she'd twist things like she always did, make me seem paranoid, dramatic. Maybe even convince Daniel I was imagining things. I needed something irrefutable. That afternoon, while Daniel rested upstairs, I carefully poured the remaining coffee into a small container. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, but I knew someone who might. My friend Mia worked as a lab technician. I called her. Kept my voice casual. Hey, this is gonna sound weird, but if I gave you a sample of something, could you test it? Just to see if there's anything in it that shouldn't be there. Mia paused. Sure? What is it? I hesitated. Coffee. A beat of silence. Then, Ava, why do I feel like this isn't just about coffee? I forced a laugh. Just a gut feeling. Can you help me out? She agreed, and I made an excuse to leave the house. Eleanor didn't ask where I was going. Just watched me with that polite, knowing smile as I grabbed my bag. She knew I was up to something. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that I was already ahead of her now. The test results came back that evening. When Mia called, I could hear the tension in her voice. Ava. I don't know how to say this, but there was something in that coffee. My stomach clenched. What? Low doses of a sedative. Not enough to be deadly, but enough to make someone feel off. Drowsy. Unwell. I gripped the phone tighter. Ava, who gave this to you? Mia asked, her voice quieter now. I swallowed hard. My mother-in-law. A sharp inhale on the other end of the line. Ava, you need to be careful. I hung up and sat there for a long moment, staring at nothing. It wasn't just paranoia. It wasn't in my head. Eleanor had been drugging me. And when I switched the cups, Daniel drank it instead. She had been willing to do this to her own son. The realization made my skin crawl. I had to tell him. Now. Daniel was lying on the couch when I got home, still looking pale. I sat beside him, my heart pounding, and told him everything. The missing items. The pregnancy test stunt. The food switching. The way I'd felt sick after drinking her coffee before. The way Eleanor had reacted this morning when he took a sip instead of me. And then, finally, I told him about the test results. Daniel stared at me. For the first time, I saw real fear in his eyes. She put something in your coffee? His voice was quiet, almost disbelieving. I nodded. And when I switched cups, you drank it instead. His face paled even more. No. No, my mom wouldn't, he stopped himself. Because he knew. Deep down he knew. The signs had been there all along. The control. The manipulation. The way Eleanor had always been just a little too involved in his life. Slowly, I reached for his hand. Daniel. She didn't want me here. And when she realized she couldn't push me out, she tried something else. His jaw clenched. His hands curled into fists. I have to talk to her. I exhaled. Daniel. But before I could stop him, the door creaked. And Eleanor was standing there. She had heard everything. For the first time, she didn't bother pretending. There was no polite smile. No warmth in her voice. Just cold, sharp truth. You were never good enough for him, Eleanor said simply. And I did what I had to do. Daniel stood up, his face twisted with disbelief, hurt. Mom. What the hell are you saying? She didn't even blink. I was protecting you. My breath caught in my throat. Daniel took a step back, shaking his head. You were poisoning my wife. You drugged me. That's not protecting me. That's, he broke off, his voice shaking. Eleanor just tilted her head slightly. She doesn't belong in this family. I felt sick. Daniel stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. You've gone too far. For a moment, she just stood there, waiting, like she thought he'd come around. Like he'd forgive her. But then Daniel turned to me. We're leaving, he said. I exhaled sharply. Daniel. I don't care, he interrupted. I don't care what excuses she has. I don't care how she tries to spin this. I'm done. And just like that, it was over. We packed that night. I didn't look back. Eleanor didn't stop us. I think in some way, she knew she had lost him forever. Daniel and I started over, away from her. For a while, I kept expecting her to show up, to try and pull him back in. But she never did. Maybe she knew it was too late. Or maybe, after all these years, she finally realized something. She had spent so long trying to control him, to own him, that in the end, she had lost him completely. And me? I had learned something too. Sometimes, the biggest threats don't come from strangers. They come from the people you trust the most.